Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Willis, and I'm the Deputy Director for Willard Library. And I'm glad you all can join us tonight. Really excited to be here. I have Jim Richmond with me here tonight, and he's going to kick off a brand new interview series that we have. It's called Today and Tomorrow, Battle Creek Views. And Jim is going to interview a different guest every Wednesday night for the next 4 nights. And they're going to explore the personal experiences and accomplishments and kind of the guest's role in the history, the community civic history of Battle Creek. We're going to flesh out their diverse perspectives, their views, their local work, their civic contributions, and we're going to look back at the history to kind of get an idea of where we're going for the future. So Jim's first guest tonight will be John Harper, and I'm going to let Jim make his introduction. But by way of introduction, Jim Richmond is a former vice president of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. He was the first full-time executive director of the Battle Creek Community Foundation. He's traveled the world. He's been to China several times, I believe, written a column for the Battle Creek Enquirer. And he compiled and published a book titled Against the Grain, Profiles of People Who Dared to Make a Difference. So I'm so happy and so pleased that he's with us here tonight and he can lead this series and get this conversation started. So with that, Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Matt.
I'm going to jump out and I'm going to look at the Facebook comments, and I'll be here if you need me. But Jim, take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. As Matt said, welcome. This is kind of an experiment on the part of Willard Library to have these series of Wednesday evening half-hour programs. And as Matt really succinctly said, while we'll be talking about some of the history of Battle Creek, the main focus is going to be on today and tomorrow. What people who have lived here for many years, who've been engaged as leaders in the community, where they think we are, where they think we might be going or should be going or could be going over time. And we hope that over the period of these 4 Wednesday evenings, we kind of open up and have a very candid discussion on some of the topics that are on the minds of people on Battle Creek. So we appreciate you joining us. And we certainly appreciate John Harper as our first guest. There couldn't be a better, literally, could not be a better first guest for this series than John is. John has lived in Battle Creek since 1974. I got here in 78, so you beat me by 4 years, John. His views about Battle Creek have been shaped over the years by the many civic leaders that he's known and by the fact that he's been a member of the Battle Creek City Commission. He's been on the board of the Kellogg Community College trustees, the board of the Battle Creek Community Foundation, and many, many other boards. For 28 years, John was in management. It says here, I think he's still, I don't know if I have to ask him if he's still active in that area, but he certainly has been a consultant in recent years. And during all that time when he focused on management, helping organizations, he also founded in 2003 a national employers association called the Consortium for Excellence in Management. As a management consultant, John has worked with most of the major leading organizations in Calhoun County, including helping the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Kellogg Company, Denso Manufacturing, Albion College, and the Federal Center, just to name a few. For many years, he has been expressing in both public and private settings his views about Battle Creek's past, present, and future. And that's, again, the topic of our session tonight. Welcome, John. I think for the second.
Well, thank you.
When you look back at all those years and all those people that you got to know and all those different organizations, all the different projects that you were involved in, what names stand out? What leadership people stand out for their ability to work with others and to get things done?
Well, we've had some incredible leaders over the years. Obviously, Dr. Russell Malvey at the Kellogg Foundation was just an outstanding example of leadership for our community. He engaged people. He was willing to be immersed in the affairs of the community very deeply. And he exemplified all those traits you would want a leader to have. He was collegial. He was forthright. He was encouraging. He had a sense of purpose and vision that he could communicate very well and make people excited about the possibilities this community could offer. But also Bill Amos comes to mind as a person who was deeply committed to Battle Creek. And he was an example of leadership that I found very encouraging. But one of my favorites was Chris Christ. Chris had the way of making people feel comfortable and to get people to sort of find common ground instead of bickering or finding fault. So those are three people I thought were absolutely outstanding, but I'm really leaving out dozens more who were just great examples to me.
So you think they were people who were optimistic about the future and also people of action, not just of talking, who wanted to get things done and did get things done. Another question, John, comes to mind. You know, you have made several presentations to the Battle Creek City Commission over the years, of course, serving on the City Commission, but you actually made several presentations. And I wonder if you would describe your message to the commission, and has it paid any attention to what you've said to them?
Well, Jim, that's a great question. I would say, yes, the commission has paid some attention, particularly to the last 12 presentations I made during the period 2018 rather to 2019. They were very attentive and willing to act on some of my ideas. I started making presentations back in 1999 and off and on made presentations all the way through till 2019. I would say in the early years, there was a lot of polite listening, but I didn't see much in the way of action. And partly I can understand that as a challenge of leadership. I mean, it's one thing to be a citizen like me telling people who are in leadership what to do, and it's another thing to be a leader and actually implement projects or make things happen. And I think there was a gap between what I was able to tell them were the end goals and what they needed to do to reach those goals. And I think they struggled a little bit with some of that.
Well, didn't you after that, though, actually provide kind of a 5-point plan or document to the commission with your ideas?
Yeah, in fact, I did that in 3 segments. The first segment was just to lay out these 5 points. And the 5 points have to do with what is our community doing with children? What is our community doing in neighborhoods? What are we doing to ensure that everybody has a living wage? I call it economic prosperity. What are we doing on beauty? What makes our city look attractive? And lastly, what is our action? What are our actions on art and culture? So I said, these are the 5 areas that we really should focus our attention on. And the reason I said that is, and let me give you kind of an analogy. Think of a hospital emergency room. The emergency doctors are doing their job. They're really terrific at handling the injuries and handling the illnesses that are presented to them in the emergency room. But no matter how good they are at treating what comes into that emergency room, it doesn't change who's coming to the emergency room, because that's in the control of the outside environment. What's going on in the outside world determines who winds up in the emergency room. And the doctors don't control that. Well, too much of our time in our community, I think, has been focused on treatment of the immediate problem. If it's a teen pregnancy, well, what do we do to get to teenage girls? Is it poor reading level? Well, what do we do to get to these kids who aren't reading at the level we like them to? It's important to address those problems, just like it's important for the emergency room doctor to treat the illness or the injury that comes into the emergency room. But you aren't changing who's going to wind up coming into your emergency room or coming into situations of teen pregnancy or poor reading skills unless you go back a step and look at the environment out of which all these things are coming. And that's what this 5-point plan was about. What we do with children before they get into trouble, either trouble with the law or trouble with school or trouble just adapting to the situations they're in. What are we doing
more of
ahead?
a prevention approach. More of a
Absolutely.
approach.
We tend not to invest in prevention because it's not as sexy as treatment. And it's harder, and it takes more people to be committed. And it requires long-term commitment, and the results don't always show up immediately. But it is the prevention that really gives you the power to make a difference on the treatment end. Because if you can prevent, then the treatment doesn't become as necessary, and you have more resources then available to treat if you aren't always dealing with new cases coming in all the time.
How do you see what do you think about the areas of well, we've talked a little bit about children, but not a lot. But one thing that worries me is our neighborhoods. I mean, it seemed to me during the 80s we had a period of a kind of a renaissance period of leadership and action and efforts to improve our neighborhoods, the way they looked, rehabbing them, a whole variety of things, and that I don't see much of that going on anymore. What's your take on that area?
Well, we've tailed off. There was, when Neighborhoods Inc. was tasked with the job of revitalizing a lot of our community's neighborhoods, we had what I thought was a very robust effort to not only get people into housing, but get the housing to a level of attractiveness where people felt a commitment to take care of their houses, to be responsible neighbors, and so forth. One of the things I think has affected not just Battle Creek, but a whole lot of communities adversely is the garage door opener. And let me explain. I can come into my house by clicking on my garage door opener, have the door go open. I drive into my garage, I close the door, and I never talk to a neighbor. I don't even have to see them.
Yeah.
And that means we don't know each other as neighbors. And the first step to having a neighborhood is to have neighbors know each other. And we've got habits in our community, like a lot of other communities, of isolation from our neighbors, doing things that don't allow us to engage them. So part of getting our neighborhoods right is the part you mentioned. That is, let's make them attractive places. Let's get people owning the houses that they're in and not just be renters. How do we create stability in neighborhoods in terms of people remaining in place for a while? But also, how do we create neighborliness? That is, how do we get people to know each other and then begin to care about each other?
You know, John, in the early 80s, we raised our children on Garrison Street on the north side. And every year, Garrison Street was blocked off. The police blocked it off, and we had a block party. And we met new neighbors. Most of the kids, of course, knew each other and went to school, but it really provided a sense over a year of shared responsibility and shared love for Garrison Avenue. And I wonder if those are still going on today, if that kind of attitude, or if it's more the closed garage problem that you raised. I think there's probably some things going on. I'm not privy to what goes on, what's planned downtown, but I have heard about projects relating to low-income housing. And of course, we have the Heritage Tower that I think is going to include some low-income housing and some other neighborhood developments through the city, through John Hart's efforts and others. But I hate to drive by that Neighborhoods Incorporated building every day and notice that it's closed. It's gone away. Other people.
Well, it is operating, Jim.
Pardon?
It is operating. Neighborhoods is operating, and there are that have block parties. So, for example, along Orchard Avenue between Sherman Road and Emmett, and they have block parties there. So, not all of it's gone. I think what we don't do enough of is celebrate these things and make them known to a broader segment of the community.
Yeah. John, turning a moment to the whole area of economics and jobs. There was a goal, I think, of 10,000 jobs or something like that in 5 years. At one point, we had a huge task force working on that. Of course, we've got the Fort closed, and we got the Fort Custer Industrial Park, and that's brought a tremendous number of jobs, but the number of jobs has certainly seemed to far exceed the wages, the relative wages of the people who work in our community. Do you think that's an accurate observation, or is that something we need to be thinking about working on?
Well, I certainly want to celebrate. I want to celebrate the successes we've had with Fort Custer Industrial Park. It's been an amazing development for our city. But we also need to keep in mind a couple of things as we plan our future. First of all, Battle Creek once was the leading wage city in the state of Michigan. Our wages were higher in Battle Creek than any other city, including Detroit. In our effort to attract jobs, we can't lose sight of the fact that our past has been a high wage past, and we ought to want that to be our future too. So we should be looking at ways to encourage the growth of higher wage businesses in our community, the founding of higher wage businesses in our community, as well as attracting higher wage jobs to our community. And I think in our rush to get jobs, we hoped that that alone would be sufficient to raise the economic prosperity level in our community. And I think the lesson we should carry away from the last 30 years is it can only take you so far. You have to reach out for the high wage opportunities, find a niche for yourself as a community, and then aggressively go after the kinds of business opportunities that will bring higher wages to your community. I think we've settled a little bit too much for the middle to lower wage. Plus, we have to realize that unless you can put a lot of these higher wage jobs in our city, where the urban area of our city is, you're going to wind up doing what has happened with Fort Custer, and that is a large chunk of the jobs at Fort Custer are being filled by people who live in Kalamazoo. And so while we've done a great job of creating jobs, we haven't done as good a job of creating jobs for Battle Creek people.
John, you've written quite a bit about a concept of beauty of being important, and beauty is kind of a word you more associate with flowers and maybe movie stars. But explain what you mean by beauty and its impact on the quality of life in our community.
Well, you mentioned flowers, and flowers remind me of color. Color is part of beauty. When you have a community that is beautiful to the eye, it has a sense of color to it that lends it a feel of attractiveness. Cleanliness is certainly part of beauty, but it's not the whole of it. We do celebrate cleanliness in Battle Creek. We have awards that the City Commission hands out for clean neighborhoods and that sort of thing. But we can go beyond cleanliness to a sense of color, a sense of attractiveness. These kinds of things, I think, make a place exciting to live in. Now, we've done a lot of this beauty,
Right.
what I call beauty work, in the downtown.
Yeah.
Our downtown looks like a very nice park, a place where you can stroll and feel comfortable and enjoy what you see. We can extend that from our downtown to the neighborhoods. We can have discussions with our citizens about what would it mean if your neighborhood was beautiful? What would it look like to you? What things would you think should be part of a beautiful? Those conversations will lead to action simply because once people start believing that beauty matters, they'll start trying to make beauty right where they are.
Well, it probably also attracts new people to the community. I mean, people
It
move.
certainly attracts new people.
I had referenced in our discussion, I called one of your writings a book, and what it was actually a collection of your writings, and that I couldn't stop thinking about. They were so well put together and so thoughtful about Battle Creek. But in one of the sections of that book, or those essays, under, I think it was 3S, you were talking that you said the 3 S's stood for story, symbol, and slogan. Could you what does that mean exactly?
Every community, in fact, not just the community, every situation requires leadership. You can't expect everything to happen just from the people bubbling up ideas. They need to have a sense of purpose. And that's what leadership is intended to provide. So how does leadership do this? Leadership does it using 3 tools. Tool 1 is stories. Stories tell people not only what are the important things to care about, but stories paint the picture of where you want to go. So leaders paint this picture and give energy to people through stories. But stories take a long time to tell. You can't tell a story in 5 seconds, but sometimes you need to remind people of the stories they know. And 2 things help with that. One is called symbols. And all of us are familiar with the symbol of the flag. And we know that when you raise the flag, it brings up those ideas in your mind of what America stands for. It stands for bravery. It stands for being a good country. It stands for protecting people. It stands for freedom. Just raising the flag reminds people of all the stories they know about America and what makes America great. So you need a symbol like a flag. But you also need slogans. And slogans also allow us to remember our stories. Land of the free, home of the brave. Now we know our stories. We know about Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, believe in Battle Creek.
Right. Yeah. And so leaders need to use these things to move our community forward. And we don't have our leaders doing enough of that right now in our community. And that's one of the things I wanted the city commission to focus on.
Your book has the title, "We Belong on Top."
We belong. Right.
What do you mean by that?
Why that title, right?
Why that title?
Well, when I started thinking about the history of Battle Creek and then doing research about it, the thing that amazed me is from its very beginning, literally from 1831 onward, Battle Creek was an amazing place. By the time the city was 10 years old, it was doing things that most places could only dream about. It was an incredible exporter of goods. It was an incredible place of energy. And I don't mean just people energy. We used water energy. We used sun energy. We were just an incredible energy place. And I realized that from about 1831 to 1941, for 110 years, Battle Creek was the premier town in Michigan and probably in the Midwest. It wasn't the biggest, but it was the most dynamic. It was the most exciting. It was the one that people came from around the world to see, to experience. Many people located in Michigan just so that they would be in this dynamic cauldron that was Battle Creek. We were on top. We were called the Queen City of Michigan. There's no reason why we shouldn't be on top again. We've just forgotten the story of how we came to be on top before and what kept us on top for 110 years. If we remember our stories and recommit to what our traditions and culture have been, then we belong on top again. And that's why I chose the title, We Belong on Top.
Well, John, we've just kind of touched on a very few of the areas that you've written so thoughtfully and spoken out so thoughtfully about. But I was really taken aback by your book, We Belong on Top. I've read it several times. I thought I knew quite a bit about Battle Creek, having lived here for 44 years. But I learned a lot from you from reading that book about the changes in the community over a period of decades and kind of where we might be going in the future. I think our time's about up for this first program. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we kind of put a wrap to it for tonight?
Well, Jim, I know one of the things that has mattered to you over the years is this sense of hope as a key ingredient to a community moving forward. And I just want to say that I not only agree with you about the hope, but the source of the hope comes from two things, in my view. A sense of the picture of where you can be as a community and some successes toward that objective. Those two things, when they come together, cause the hope to rise. And when there's hope, then there's energy. And when there's energy, there's action. And when there's action, there's results.
Yeah.
And if we can have that hope, that sense of the possible, and we had it pretty strongly between, say, 1975 and 1994, and then we kind of stopped telling ourselves stories that empowered us, but we can get it back. We have that capacity, and I'd like to see us do it.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of great leaders today. Some of them new, and I think I'm optimistic, and I think you are too, that the glass is really half full, not half empty. And thank you so much for being on the program tonight, for kicking off the program.
Well, thank you, Jim. You're a great host. You're a great host. I enjoyed myself. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
And I want to thank both of you. That was a wonderful conversation. I really got a lot out of it. And I think the first episode went well. If I can get back in the camera here. And next week, who do we have, Jim? It's Steve Jessup, I believe.
Steve Jessup, and he's another deep thinker like John, who has been involved in a whole range of things, including taking the Sullivan Dairy Barn when it was all boarded up. People, old timers will remember Sullivan Ice Cream, the old Sullivan Ice Cream stores in Battle Creek, but of taking that barn and with a partner turning it into a high-tech center for business. But Steve has been involved in a variety of things, and is a very interesting person. And I think we'll enjoy chatting with him and learning about his own experiences in the community.
That'll be great. I look forward to it. Thank you again, both of you, and we'll be back next week. Thank you very much. And all of us at Willard Library, we miss all of you out there. We can't wait. We hope to see you soon, and I know we will, back at Willard Library.
Right.
But until then, we'll see you back on this broadcast next Wednesday at 7 p.m. And thank you then. Okay.
Thanks again, John.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Matt.
All right. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.